Now, I was told that Bidenomics is the greatest thing ever to happen, that it's working and that it's working everywhere. And oh my gosh, there's so much to be proud of. I didn't hear this from just some sycophants. I didn't hear this just from some Biden acolyte. I heard this directly from Joe Biden, directly from Karine Jean-Pierre, directly from the Biden White House. They'll admit they didn't come up with the term Bidenomics, but they are proud, thrilled, overjoyed to embrace it. The question before us is why, considering interest rates just went up again, which would be weird if inflation was really cooling. Guys, welcome to the show. Good to be with you. Presented by Americans for Prosperity, americansforprosperity.org. Economic liberty, free speech. That is what it's all about. This is a very, very odd moment. The Biden White House cheering, but you and I on Midwest Mainstreet having a much different point of view. Wall Street seems to be going along just fine. Wall Street doesn't seem to be having any issues whatsoever. Everybody's trying to figure out how to make their loot. And even when Jerome Powell makes a statement, doesn't seem to have much of effect. But if we're going to see an increase in interest rates, that affects how we do business. Now, maybe we got saved by UPS coming to a deal with the Teamsters, so we're not going to have a strike that would have crippled businesses all across the country. Personally, the cigar industry is saved because a lot of people do mail order cigars, and without UPS, that wouldn't be happening. But what of this interest rate increase? What are we supposed to take from it? Because it would seem to me that this means that inflation isn't under control. Now, is it? Inflation is not under control, guys. If it was under control, then why in the world would we see an increase in interest rates? Does Bidenomics actually work? Let me bring in a Dr. Matt Will, economist at the University of Indianapolis, Dr. Matt Will, W-I-L-L, Dr. Matt Will, on the Twitter box. Let me start with this, Dr. Will. This is Jerome Powell, chairman of the Federal Reserve, letting you know that interest rates are going up.
Since early last year, the FOMC has significantly tightened the stance of monetary policy. Today, we took another step by raising our policy interest rate 0.25 percentage point, and we are continuing to reduce our securities holdings at a brisk pace. We've covered a lot of ground, and the full effects of our tightening have yet to be felt. Looking ahead, we will continue to take a data-dependent approach in determining the extent of additional policy firming that may be appropriate.
That translated, I believe, sir, is you ain't seen nothing yet. We reserve the right to raise interest rates anytime we want, and anybody who thinks that inflation is under control is out of their minds. Am I right or am I wrong, Dr. Will?
I probably would phrase it differently, Tony.
I'm shocked.
Because, we've talked about this battle between Biden and Powell. And for 2 years, Biden's been winning. Powell is now winning, but you heard him say it very clearly. It's not yet under control, but we're getting there. So we got to be honest with the data, Tony. It's getting better. It's still bad, but it's getting better. And, I got to talk about this Bidenomics and this, it's Biden versus Powell. I'm telling you, it's a bunch of battles. Biden was winning for 2 years. Now Powell's winning. Biden versus Congress. He was winning for 2 years. Now he's losing. Biden versus private businesses. He was winning for 2 years. Tony, only Karine Jean-Pierre could call these losses wins. I mean, to them, night is day is night, up is down. These aren't your droids. I mean, we've got a GDP report coming out in a few minutes, and I can tell you it's pretty clear what it's going to be, and it's not good Bidenomics in this report that's coming out.
Yeah, that report that came out today. But I think the question is, does Bidenomics work? The White House is cheering, but Midwest Mainstreet really isn't. And I will admit to you that it is a bit schizophrenic. We see the data, and then we see the stores, and it's all super confusing. And I get it when people say to me, whoa, what are you complaining about, Katz? Everything is kind of awesome out there. I don't believe it's kind of awesome out there. First things first, is Bidenomics working? And could you define their guiding principle?
Yeah, I can define their guiding principle and I can tell you if it's working. First, let's see if it's working. So Powell yesterday said real wages are down. You, Tony, you are making less money. That's Bidenomics. Residential spending is down. Tony, that's Bidenomics. Domestic profits for corporations are down. That's Bidenomics. Global profits are down. That's Bidenomics. The only thing that's causing GDP to go up right now, Tony, government spending is up. That's Bidenomics. So I won't qualify whether it's good or bad. Let's just say residential spending down profits down globally. You make less money. That's Bidenomics.
But the other side of this is you said you got to admit to some good news. Inflation is cooling. Did you see something within the last report where we saw inflation at 3% that shows a trend down? Or could this be a momentary blip? And we should be clear, I would rather have Dr. Will, talking to Dr. Matt Will, economist at the University of Indianapolis. I would rather have, sir, a trend down. I don't want the blip. What did you see from the reporting?
Tony, I got to take exception with some of these comments, because you're saying like, oh, well, inflation's better. Tony, that's like saying I'm in the ICU, but they've taken me off the ventilator, but I'm still in the ICU. I'm still in risky conditions. You are correct. Things look better. There is, I don't know if it's a blip or a trend. I'll tell you in 3 months, but I can tell you right now, things are better, but they're just not as bad as they were 6, 9, 12 months ago. You shouldn't be happy with this situation, Tony. Business investments are down. Equipment purchases are down. We've had 8 consecutive months of contracting U.S. private industry. Tony, you tell me, how do you want your economy to grow? Through expanded government or through expanded business?
I want it to grow through expanded business.
Well, it's not.
Just in case I had to actually answer the question. I didn't want to just leave it hanging there. Let me show you something. This right here, I was able to find 2 different headlines. So this is CNBC. And CNBC has the headline, Morgan Stanley credits Bidenomics for much stronger than expected GDP growth. Literally 24 hours later, I found this story, why the messaging around Bidenomics might not be working. So if I have a group like Morgan Stanley crediting Bidenomics, that is an indicator, a signal outward, sir, that this is working, that things are doing better because of Joe Biden's policies. Why would Morgan Stanley lie?
Well, okay, they're not lying, Tony. The problem is something you and I have spoken about for years now, and that is GDP and Keynesian economics. The way GDP is calculated, if the government spends $5,000 on a hammer, Tony, they add $5,000 to the GDP. If you and I spend $15 on the same hammer, we only add $15 to the GDP. That is a flawed way of looking at growth. And so what Morgan Stanley is saying is correct. Bidenomics, which is the massive infrastructure bill, lots of spending, the American Rescue Plan.
Sorry about that. We lost you for a second, Dr. Will. Let's bring you back really quick. You were talking about hammers, sir.
Yeah, I mean, if the government, according to Keynesian economics, if a government spends $5,000 on a hammer, that's 5,000 more GDP. If you and I spend $15, it's 15 more. But you and I both know it's just the same hammer. There's a flaw in the way Keynes does things. So therefore, Morgan Stanley's correct, Tony. The GDP is up because of Bidenomics. Because what's Bidenomics? Infrastructure spending, American Rescue Plan spending, the CHIPS and Science Act spending, the Inflation Creation Act spending. Tony, this is a false narrative, because when you look at actual businesses, they are not growing, they're shrinking. We have actual data from businesses. The only thing growing is the government.
Talking to Dr. Matt Will, economist at the University of Indianapolis. You are constantly in touch with business owners, and you're constantly watching factors of the market of the economy that those of us who aren't economists don't watch. When Jerome Powell says we're raising the interest rates, the target rate is now 5.25% to 5.5%. It's the highest it's been in 22 years. Was there anything in that commentary that I just shared with you, or other things you may have heard from Jerome Powell that makes you think they don't believe Bidenomics is working, and they're pretty sure that to keep inflation further at bay, we're going to go even higher?
Yes, because there were two things he said, Tony. One was that real wages are down. I said this earlier, that you and I are making less money. So yeah, that means Bidenomics isn't working. Now, Cringe will tell you it's great that it's working. He also said that the inflation is not yet under control. It's getting better, and we've still got work to do. So right there, he made two very clear statements that we are not out of the woods. So that's according to Jerome Powell. Now, I'll tell you, I said at the beginning, I'll say it again. He's winning the boxing match at the moment against Biden. But you know what? There's more rounds to go in this fight.
One of the things that's come up is that when Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House, put together the deal regarding the debt ceiling with Joe Biden, it said that you have to pass all 12 appropriations bills, or else basically the penny plan goes into effect. There'll be a 1% cut across the board. Think of it going back to the Obama days and sequestration, that kind of conversation. Well, right now there's talk about Biden engaging a couple of vetoes, which would mean that the rules of the deal are not being adhered to. A 1% cut across the board. A 1% cut would mean less spending. Does that mean a better opportunity for the economy?
Yes. Now, Tony, it will have a drag on GDP because GDP is this crazy formula. But if the government spends less and private economy spends more, that's good long-term for the economy. The economy can only grow when you have private businesses doing their thing. And I'm kind of a fan of this whole thing. You remember, it's a battle. I mentioned at the beginning, it's a battle between Biden and Congress also. And Congress won that battle in the debt ceiling. Now, they didn't do a great win, but they got a win, and they slowed down this insane spending by the government, and they got this 1% across the board cut. I hope it happens, Tony. I'd be very happy to see the government finally shrink. Have we seen that in our lifetime?
No. I look, I'm with you in theory, but cuts to the military don't make me happy. And I'm willing, if you call me Lindsey Graham, I'm willing to fight you about this. I don't like the 1% across the board. I want 6% in some spots. I just don't think I want the 1% across the board, but it looks like it's going to happen. Dr. Matt Will, economist at the University of Indianapolis. I appreciate taking the time to be with us. Hey, Matt Baer, talk to the people about traffic. And for you, I can't thank you enough for joining us here on the show. That's right. We were doing radio and other things all at the same time. We're kind of fancy like that. And my thanks to Americans for Prosperity, AmericansForProsperity.org, economic liberty and free speech. That's what it's all about. They let me do the show. I greatly appreciate them, and I will catch you next time, guys.